We are recording, so Ashley, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tanner. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Tanner and I are gonna sort of pass back and forth for these first few slides as we go through here, but essentially our goals for today as part of your full partnership gathering meeting are to go over the past year's accomplishments, which Tanner will do, and then I'll give a little background on myself and a couple other folks that are on the line with us today, and we'll walk through the strategic planning process that we're going to be embarking on together this year. And then we'll go into a little more detail on the planning timeline, the framework for where we expect the strategic plan to go, and some next steps and action items. There'll be a couple opportunities where we'll open up the lines for more discussion, communication amongst ourselves about a couple different options for moving forward with direction. So just I think it's you're all pretty familiar with Zoom. Using Zoom is pretty common, and unmuting yourselves. So just a heads up to jump in when we get to those opportunities. So Tanner, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Great, Ashley, thank you. I just wanted to take a quick moment, if we could, to share a short personal anecdote from a little bit of what I've witnessed over the last year in serving in this capacity as the host partner for the collaborative, to kind of help tee up the conversation that we'll be initiating today and continuing over this year. We showed this picture. Most of you might not know this, but I'm a runner. What you might know when you look at this picture is that's definitely not me. But over the last few years, I've trained for and ran the half marathon in Shepherdstown. It's of course canceled this year because of the pandemic, but I'm still training. And what that looks like for me, it's a lot of running through Charlestown really early in the morning, in the dark, with my shiny clothes and lamp on and all those things. And Wednesdays in particular, I do a really long run. And I say that because in every one of those long runs, I reach this place in the run where it's kind of this hill, and it's where I know it kind of triggers in my mind. It's the halfway mark. I'm halfway through this big run, and you know, every time at that exact moment is always just
okay. I took myself off of video.
In the run for me.
Out why.
Georgie, you might need to mute yourself.
Audio.
Is it Zoom?
Zoom.
Can Maya or someone from Rivers mute Georgia? She's figuring that out. So again, you know, as I'm making those runs, it's always just the lowest point in the run for me. And you know, I'm really far from home, you know, cranky and sleepy, and it's just, you know, not very comfortable. And what I find is every time is if I can push through that moment, it's pretty smooth sailing the rest of the way, because that hard moment is behind me. And I shared that short story just because I do strongly believe that the
little pull down menu, right?
It's in that same moment. Georgia, if you can hear us, can you mute yourself?
He is muted.
So again, we're kind of in that moment as a collaborative, in that, you know, as individuals and the organizations we represent, and even the partnership as a whole, you know, we're in that you know, tricky place where we've never been this far before from kind of our turf and from business as we know it. So, you know, I think at the other side of that coin is we've never been this close to success before. It's never been so attainable to us. So, you know, just as strongly as I think that we are in that moment, I think that we will get through it by keeping the course of this kind of collaborative process. So, you know, what we're going to do today, like Ashley mentioned, is look a little bit back for just a few minutes on where we've come from and just our short year kind of as a formalized partnership. And then we'll be turning it back over to Ashley to really take it from here and what our, you know, future looks like, starting at this strategic planning process that we'll be kicking off. So the biggest thing to convey, you know, on top of all of that is as always, just my continued appreciation and very humbled to be in this position to serve you all and to bring what we do to help support the collaborative. So Ashley, if you could forward to the next slide, please. So for those of you all that were at our big kickoff gathering in September of 2019, we had it at Charles Washington Hall in Charlestown. We met for about 2 hours. We spent the first hour talking through some items and our goals in a big group setting. And then we broke off into our smaller tables and met with the steering committee and the 3 different work groups. And, we said, what are our strengths as these small groups? What do we need to succeed? And what are some of the tasks that we've identified we want to work towards? Ashley, if you hit the next slide, the reason why we kind of share those is since then, we've had a lot of achievements, and we do want to take that time, if it's a short moment, to celebrate those. The steering committee said one of their priority tasks a year ago they had identified as a governance document, something to more formally say who we are and what we're trying to do. We worked with them. We created that operations guide. They said they wanted to see more coordination and communication across the collaborative. So we've really done that by creating, monthly meetings where we're talking. We've created a website for full transparency and the hosting of all of our documents. We continue to work with all of you all and created a monthly newsletter in the last few months. Big thanks to Tori Martin with Berkeley County Farmland Protection Board for her assistance with that. We couldn't do that without her. And then just in general, we have a functioning partnership where we are meeting, where we are communicating and coordinating with each other and moving forward towards collaboration. Ashley, if you hit the slide again, the conservation work group, the big task we talked with them about last year was prioritizing high value land to conserve. And we've done that with our GIS prioritization process that they led. And then since they completed that process, they've provided a lot of technical support and assistance to the other work groups. Ashley, if you go ahead and hit one more slide again, the education and outreach work group, we've had some high profile news stories that we've done. In summer of 2019, Liz Wheeler and Martin Burke met with us out to talk to West Virginia Public Broadcasting and do this great radio piece about protecting Civil War battlefields and the benefits there for also protecting drinking water supplies. We've been working in the last couple months on some prioritized landowner outreach, which is we're going to be talking about. We actually have a meeting tomorrow. So for education outreach work group folks, we get a double dose this week of meeting tomorrow as well to talk about what worked and what didn't and where we want to focus our outreach moving forward. We've created some great landowner legacy videos. If you haven't watched those yet, please do. Those have been a great way to share these short, sweet, really succinct stories of why landowners have conserved their land to hopefully inspire others to do the same. And lastly, if you hit the one more for me, the stewardship work group has worked really hard over the last year in developing a BMP toolkit to help accelerate conservation practices on conserved land. So taken together, when we compare kind of the top of this slide of what we talked about in 2019 to what we've achieved, we've really stuck with it. And that's thanks to all of you all for collaborating and working on this. So congratulations to all of you. We're looking forward to more successes like this as we go. Ashley, if you go forward one more time. So for those, again, that were at our meeting in 2019, it was about a year ago in September of 2019, you'll notice we're all about a year younger and there's no face masks. And so at the end of that meeting, we were able to take a really nice picture where we said, we're feeling good, we're feeling confident, we're happy with what we're talking about. And we want to do the same thing today. It won't be a photograph, but what I'm gonna ask is that we're gonna do kind of the same thing, but take it as a screenshot. And so if you aren't already, what we would ask is that you turn on your video screen. I saw Angie just pop up, awesome. So I'll give everyone a second to do that. Turn on your video screen and you can turn it off afterwards or keep it on either way, but I'll do kind of a countdown, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll get a nice picture of everyone. And it's kind of that same moment as before. It's a moment for us to all kind of just say, hey, we're still meeting, we're still doing this, and this is still a valuable process for us. So one last second to turn on your screens. All right, on the count of 3, thumbs up, smiles. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, those are some good looking folks. Thank you all for that. All of this presentation will be online afterwards. The links in that presentation are all live to take you to all of those accomplishments that you can dig into them. And with that, Ashley, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Tanner. And just to sort of provide my perspective on all of those accomplishments too, it was really great being able to dig into all of the materials and seeing all the transparent information that you all had posted online, the BMP toolkit, the operations guide, just a really great way to get a bit of a crash course on the work that you've already been doing and how that would lead into our strategic planning efforts together. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Renee to give a brief introduction from EPA and then take it back over.
Hi, everybody. For those of you who aren't familiar with who I am, my name is Renee Bryant, and I am the Source Water Team Lead at EPA Region 3 in Philadelphia. Michelle Audie happened to discover some of your meetings some months ago, and I know she also presented at one of your workshops. And since then, we've been very curious and excited about what this collaborative has been focused on. Love the energy, love the focus, and love the collaborative efforts that you've all been contributing to this entire time. So as a part of me being a lead, it was one of my goals was to focus on how we at EPA could further support these collaboratives. And we came upon a rare instance where the Source Water Program was asked if we had any projects that we would like to support. This doesn't happen very often, but sometimes timing is everything. And so we asked each of our collaboratives if they had projects that they would like financial support for. Tanner put in submitted 2 projects, and this project was able to be funded. The second project, unfortunately, didn't work out logistic-wise, but this is still a fantastic endeavor. And so what EPA is providing is the opportunity to utilize Ashley and Jacqueline's leadership, facilitation skills, and also ability to author a strategic plan for your collaborative. It's actually in the total of $60,000, but with all federal agencies, we always have to make things complicated. So we couldn't just hand the money over to the collaborative and say, have at it. So therefore, I will be participating just as a project officer as we continue through this process, which is fine by me because I love learning from you all and would love to help contribute any way that I can in order to make this a successful process for everybody. So super excited about this, really looking forward to seeing what the end result looks like at the end of June. Ashley does turn into a pumpkin at the end of June, fortunately or unfortunately, but you all have made such great strides before this and up to this point that I feel confident that we're going to be able to get an excellent plan in place that everyone contributed to. It puts you on the right foot in terms of continuing with the progress that you've already made, and then we'll see where you go from there. So if anyone has any additional questions about logistics, feel free to ask myself or Tanner, but otherwise, as I said, I'm more of just a project officer, just making sure logistically we get everything we need done so that Ashley can support you all as much as possible. Thanks.
Thanks, Renee, and thanks, Tanner, and everyone for dedicating your time today to hop on with us and giving me some time to walk through the proposed plan with you. As Renee said, the funding for this is coming from EPA. I work for a company called the Cadmus Group. We're a strategic consulting firm and technical consultancy, and our mission is really to help solve the world's most challenging problems specifically in energy, water, and transportation sectors to improve safety, security, and resiliency in communities. So since the early 80s, a lot of our work has been specifically for EPA's Office of Water and in supporting communities and the evolving challenges to provide safe drinking water and implement clean water initiatives across the country. So I've worked with a few of you on source water protection efforts in EPA's Region 3 over the past few years, and as a firm, we've been providing support to workshop strategic planning efforts in this area for the past 3 or 4 decades. So my role for this effort is going to be largely working with the planning teams and community partners to facilitate this process. In other projects, we facilitate new or expanding partnerships, developing action-oriented plans, and providing tools and resources to help implement those plans. So a lot of overlap in what we're going to talk about today for the strategic planning effort. And this work specifically helping to document a strategic approach that provides you all with a framework to achieve your goals is really the best part of my job, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm based in Northern Virginia and also have been lucky enough to spend some time in the West Virginia Panhandle, and I'm excited, as Renee is, to learn from you all and see some of the tools, if any of the tools we've used in the past and for other efforts in strategic planning process may fit your needs, or if we can work together to develop some new guidance and tools that are really specific to what you want to accomplish moving forward. I'm also joined by my colleague, Jacqueline Sherry, who's on the line, and she'll also be supporting our work together. She's an analyst academist with us and has experience working with communities to build strategic tools and on planning efforts and resiliency efforts.
Hello, everyone. Like Ashley said, I'm Jacqueline, and I'm going to be supporting this work and excited to embark on this planning effort with you all.
Thanks, Jacqueline. So we're going to jump into going over the strategic planning process and provide some specifics on what our next steps are and the proposed framework for the strategic plan. Some of you may have seen this before. I think Michelle Audi had presented it to a group, a subset of this group. So this is kind of our iterative strategic planning process, which shows our opportunity for identifying where we are now, where we could be, and then determining where we want to go, how to get there, and then assessing whether or not what we've done has changed where we are now, and if we've been successful in getting to where we want to be. All of this whole process is underpinned by your partnership's mission, values, and purpose, as well as long-term aspirations and direction. So we'll be using a lot of these terms throughout the process: mission, values, purpose, goals, objectives. And right now, we're really in this kind of where we are, where could we be process. So as Tanner was saying, we did a little looking backwards at our accomplishments from the past year. The work is currently undergoing. And today we're going to take a look at our long-term goals and aspirations, see if we can refine a little more about where we could be in future scenarios that we want to get to across the entire collaborative and all partners. Then we're going to take those goals that we share across all of the work groups and everybody that is a partner in the collaborative, and we're going to identify specific objectives for where we want to be in a shorter term horizon, 2 to 5 years, and really focusing on making that as specific as we can and working within the framework that you already have developed. Then we'll move on to identifying action plans, which are the how do we get there, the strategies, tactics, and implementation that we will use in order to meet our objectives. And then finally, and this will mostly be after we conclude developing the plan in June, but there's also this opportunity to review and assess. And so as part of the strategic plan, we'll discuss and draft up some guidance and tools to help you with that next step in order to make this a continuous improvement and iterative process. So the proposed format for the strategic plan is to have these shared partnerships goals. This is really to consider the way the collaborative is currently structured and the way that work is being done right now, and to fit that into that strategic planning process. First, we'll focus on developing our shared partnership goals across the collaborative, and there are currently 3 long-term goals that were identified in the operations guide those were finalized this past spring. We may choose to update those goals, to create additional goals, to tweak those goals as they are, or to just add more detail to them in order to come up with our shared partnership goals. And then from there, we'll take a look at how to take specific objectives within each of the work groups to meet those shared partnership goals. These will be work group specific goals, and they'll be developed in order to meet our shared goals, but specific to the work that you have been doing and could realistically accomplish within the work groups as they currently stand. Then we'll create our action plans, which will be to address each of those objectives that were developed. So all of this work is going to go on within the work groups. Finally, in order to develop actionable plans, we are proposing developing these objectives and action plans within the work group structure, since that's how a lot of the work is currently being planned and accomplished. But we also understand that there needs to be flexibility and the ability for you to evolve from there and to identify and develop flexibility within the strategic plan. And so we'll be keeping that in mind as we develop the strategic plan guidance and additional information that could be included, so that when you get to that assess and review portion of planning, there are tools to help you identify whether or not evolving and creating new work groups or reassessing how work's being conducted can be done. This is just a visual representation of the proposed approach. So we have our shared vision and mission, which we'll touch on in a few minutes. And we also have our goals. These are our current shared goals, which we may revise, tweak, or update. Next, we have our steering committee's roles and responsibilities. So this will be for the steering committee what their role is and how they take action to meet their responsibilities in order to support the goals of the entire partnership. In addition to the steering committee and the work that they'll be doing to identify and document that role, we'll have each of the work groups identifying their own objectives and action plans to meet those objectives. While that's going on, there will be opportunities for work groups to identify objectives or action plans that also rely on the inclusion of another work group or input from another work group. And so while these may look siloed and they will be developed within the work groups, there is opportunity within our schedule for work groups to review and provide input on other work groups' objectives and actions. So just to move into our kind of goal setting and discussion around goals, we wanted to bring up our mission and vision. So the collaborative's mission is protecting drinking water through land conservation. And the agreed upon mission is a vibrant network collaborating on land conservation and stewardship practices to protect safe, clean drinking water for communities in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. The third element that we often talk about when we are thinking about the foundational aspects of an organization are the organization's values. So these are the beliefs, philosophies, and principles that drive your work. Some suggestions for this group may include source water protection, land conservation, stewardship practices, partnership, collaboration, and teamwork, and diversity. These 5 potential values are items that we picked up on and pulled from the information that was available online, from the materials that you all have been working on and publishing over the past year. And they're really open for discussion. What the values, like the mission and the vision, can help us with is to kind of gut check that the goals that we're setting, shared goals across the collaborative, as well as the objectives and our action plans, that we are keeping these values in mind, that we're addressing things that are important to us as a group, and that ultimately our goals, our vision, our mission are all being supported by the action plans that we're putting in place to move forward with. So before we move on, do these values resonate with folks on the call? Is there anything that should be here that's missing? These values are really just part of the puzzle. So if there's something missing right now that drives the work, that can help us with moving forward and having some of these additional direction discussions, we can always add them while we're talking through goals. And so there'll be opportunities for you to provide additional input through a survey and through emails if there are any updates to that. But just while we have it up, is there anything anyone wants to share? Okay, great. Well, if you do, like I said, there'll be a couple opportunities to provide that input soon. So next, we're just going to share the current long-term goals. Again, were just pulled from the operations guide, which was finalized in the spring, so should be relatively familiar and relevant still time-wise. We have raising awareness among the public and policymakers about the link between protecting lands and clean water, collaborating to develop and implement conservation strategies, share information, and cooperatively seek public and private funding for easements and the costs associated with them, and cooperatively seeking policies that build local capacity to conserve lands that protect water. So these right now are sort of our big, aggressive, audacious goals for the direction of the collaborative of the work that the partners are doing. Our next step with these goals is to determine if they are specific enough for us to take our next step forward, which is developing our specific objectives per work group to move forward with developing action plans. So in order to, if we sort of backtrack from there, our action plans need to be specific enough that we can measure whether or not we have been successful and are moving in a direction that ultimately leads towards our big goals. If we take a step back from the action plans, then in order to develop action plans with those specific metrics that we can accomplish, we need to have objectives or work group specific goals that are on a slightly shorter time frame, maybe 1 to 3 years, and that focus in on our next steps and the actions that the goals that we want to accomplish in the near term within each of the work groups. In order to develop those objectives, we need to have at least some direction, shared direction across the collaborative with our shared goals. So one way that we do this, and we will do this for our more specific objectives within the work groups, is setting SMART goals or SMART objectives. And we just wanted to kind of run our current goals through a bit of a gut check here with setting SMART goals and see if there are any improvements, tweaks, or additional goals that we as an entire group want to consider to make setting those work group specific objectives a little bit easier. So when we talk about setting SMART goals, what we mean is it's an acronym for identifying goals that are specific, they're direct and detailed, they're measurable, so they're quantifiable and we can actually track progress or success against those goals. They're attainable, so they're realistic, and we have the tools and resources in hand now, or we have a way to get those tools and resources in order to achieve the goals. They're relevant, so they align with our mission, our vision, and our values. And then they have deadlines. Some of these elements are not going to be as applicable for bigger goals. Our timeline may be 10 to 20 years. But as we get more specific and we start narrowing down from our goals to our objectives to our action plans, we'll start getting more and more specific on things like being time bound and being measurable and having metrics to measure against. So for our current 3 goals, to assess and improve upon those goals, we're proposing the following few questions just to start thinking about if there are any opportunities for us to improve upon the goals. And we'll open the lines up for a discussion right now, but similarly to providing any feedback on the visions, there will be, on the value statements, there will be an opportunity, a survey that'll go out following our call, and that will give you all an opportunity to really mull over some of these questions, the current long-term goals, if we need more specific goals across the entire collaborative, or if what we have right now is enough for the work groups to take their next actions, which is to develop their objectives or work group specific goals. So when we're thinking about our current shared long-term goals, do these goals still resonate with us? Do they resonate with all of the collaborative partners? Were finalized pretty recently, included in the operations guide. So time-wise, they should still be pretty relevant, but they may not fully resonate with you. There may be an element that you think is missing or that could really strengthen the goals. The next part is whether or not the goals are achievable and measurable. How will we know when we've achieved a goal? How will we know when we have gotten to a point where we can take step 2 or move on from what we're currently working towards? Is there a way to assess that a goal has been achieved or to revise a goal as needs evolve? And then the final set of questions is, what's missing? Where do we want to be in 5 years? What do we want to be known for? It's really thinking if these goals fully encompass all of those elements, or if there's something that's currently missing that is really important for the collaborative at large. And these are our long-term goals. We're talking 5 to 20 years in the future and where we want to go, but also keeping in mind that the actions that we take in the next 5 years will ultimately be the foundation for moving forward after that. So I'm just going to bring up our current shared long-term goals again to have them up on the screen as a prompt if anyone has any questions or initial feedback, thoughts to walk through, and we can kind of toggle between this slide and the prior slide with our questions, if that's helpful. Maybe let's take it just one at a time. We do have some time built into the schedule today to talk through these. So raising awareness among the public and policymakers about the link between protected lands and clean water. Is that a goal that resonates with everyone still, raising awareness among the public and policymakers about the link between protected lands and clean water? And feel free, yeah, a couple folks are chatting in. That's great. If you just want to voice agreements, that's a great way to do that. So it seems like that does resonate with folks. That is a strong goal for a shared goal across the partnership. Is this goal achievable? Oh, we have let's see, a couple folks have chatted in. Yes, so from David, yes, the goal seems to be public and policymakers who are aware of these links. So making them aware of of those links. Is that right, David? Is that the core objective for that goal?
Yes, I was just sort of rephrasing it as an achievement.
Mm. Great. So that awareness goal is achieved when we've made the public and policymakers aware of the linkages. Great. And then from Jennifer, it's great to relook at these goals with these questions in mind. They hold up well thinking into the future. Great. And from Mary, it may resonate with the partners, but what about the property owners? So for what we really want the goals to give us a place to strive to be at. So I think maybe, Mary, you're getting at a good point here with how we communicate and talk about these goals and how we go out into the community and get them on board, get the public and policymakers to understand this link. We may have different language that we want to use in those instances. And then from Emily, achievable, relevant, and could be put on a timeline. We'll need more specific objectives, but it seems okay on specificity for a big goal. Measuring will likely be difficult. And that's all right. In this stage and with these goals, we want to look at them through our lens, our smart lens, and with these questions in mind. But there are going to be some goals that are too large or encompass too many elements to be able to get them to be really specific or time bound. So it's really just improvements that we could make. For measuring the success, that could be something that comes in at the objectives level too. Or we may end up needing to have this as our long-term goal, and then come up with sort of sub goals within it that can be a little more metrics driven, where we can measure against it. And Jackie, I said promoting transparency is important for raising public awareness. It's great. And from Jennifer, I assume that there may also be outcomes nested under these goals where we could identify quantifiable metrics for those things that can be counted. Yep, exactly. So that's kind of where we're trying to get to right now. And I think we wanted to propose this part of the goal setting right now so that everyone could see the 3 goals as they currently stand. We could start talking through the elements that we may want to consider but don't necessarily need to see if these goals, the way that they stand, are enough, are specific enough, or measurable enough for us to take the next step with the objectives. So once we send out that survey, if a goal is okay as it stands, then we can leave it as is and just move forward from there. If a goal is okay as it stands, but we think it's going to be hard to take that next step towards developing more specific objectives, then we may need to come up with some outcomes, that nest under the goals to be able to measure against. And it looks like Georgia had said, I see the goals are okay as more general and bigger, and then the objectives are that step down and being the smart part. And Barbara agreed about the difference between the goals and objectives, and that is ultimately, we are going to focus much more on the smart elements of our objectives, of our specific goals in the work groups. It's just making sure that what we have here for our current long-term goals is as specific, as measurable, as time-bound as we think they need to be. And they may be great the way that they are right now, and that may be enough direction for each of the work groups to move forward, which is perfectly fine. Are there any other comments or questions about these goals? We will, like I've said, we will send out a survey. You'll have an opportunity to sort of score the goals against some of those questions and SMART criteria. And then from there, we'll move forward with either updating or just finalizing the goals as they stand. And that's what we'll reconvene and talk about at our next meeting. Tanner's proposing that for goal 1, could we make it more specific by saying clean drinking water? So we have raising awareness among the public and policymakers about the link between protected lands and clean water, making that clean drinking water. We have some chatting in agreeance. That works for me. Thanks, Georgia says that's a good example of a clarifying change that better fits with our mission. And from Mike, I think the link between protected lands is an important one, as it's often a critical component to keeping water clean, right? Thanks for that suggestion, Tanner. That is a great way that we can just very slightly tweak language in our existing goals if there are any opportunities like that to better align with the mission, the vision, and thanks, Georgia, for pointing that out too.
Ashley, this is Tanner. I know we'll get it in the follow-up survey. I hope we'll get that and receive a good response from everyone on that. But I would like to just kind of throw out and engage people's thoughts on the third goal that's listed here, to see if just what people think about that one.
Great. So for the cooperatively seeking policies that build local capacity to conserve lands that protect water. Within that, Tanner, do you have any specific elements that you're hoping to kind of spark discussion around? If it still resonates, or if there are ways to get more specific?
The question of how it resonates with folks working towards kind of on that policy side, how folks feel about that one.
Yes.
So, hey,
Great.
how's everyone doing?
Thanks.
This is Matt Pennington from Region 9. You know, what level are you seeking the policies to be developed at? Is it federal, state, or local? You have local capacity there. Are we assuming that it's local policies?
Well, the real question is, are we seeking policies, or are we supporting implementation of policies?
Good question, Chuck.
Why not do both?
Well, Tanner, this is Jackie. Let me just jump in. I know we talked about this before, and I'll give an example. It was identified that Charlestown Utility Board does not have a per se mission statement. And I think in the future, we're going to be working on that as I've requested. So that's one of the things that, as a member of the steering committee, you know, having the collaborative help with that kind of, you know, building on that public policy type of thing. So I think that that's an important, not that we have to enter into that as a utility, and of course the utility stands on its own with regard to that, but I think there's some real help that could come from the collaborative with other utilities. I don't know what you think about that.
I think it's more important, Jackie, what you think about it. I mean, West Virginia Rivers, we're here to help facilitate, but we want to hear, the reason why I would pose a question like that is to hear, and it's kind of Matt's question too, is what we do is up to what you all want to do. And so I think it's good kind of having those discussions, and we're here to support what our partners, what you all think, because the collaborative is not West Virginia Rivers, it's all of us together. So the responses so far, I think, are strong on that.
I would like to chime in on that. I mean, it seems like the goal is to have policies that build local capacity to conserve lands that protect drinking water. So that's the goal. And I think it feels like part of the strategic planning process is to find out, as Matt asked, you know, at what levels can we have the most impact? You know, if we start getting a county commission that wants to do away with, start robbing the farmland protection funding, for example, which is one of our primary ways of protecting land here, then maybe we would need to do something about that. So I embrace having it in there as a goal, that we want to have the right policies in place and keep them there.
Yeah, David.
I agree, and we're just
Real quick, it's interesting you say that, David, about a county commission's policies. I mean, I know that there was a new statewide bill that brings money back from the state back into the county commission budget off of real estate transfers. I'm not clear on if that necessarily robs it from farmland protections. Maybe Mark could highlight that, but that's an interesting comment in terms of policy. You know, how do you start engaging a county commission who oversees budgetary items within that jurisdiction, that funding that's coming back off of real estate transfers could still be utilized for conservation efforts, protect drinking water, any kind of hazard mitigation, really, whether it be source water protection or flooding, both go kind of hand in hand in that department. So that right there could be some sort of policy development or a conservation strategy. So Mark, do you have any clarification on that new budget or that new bill that was passed last year on how those funds are coming back over a 10-year period?
Yeah, Matt, that effort actually started in Berkeley County. And when the original legislation was passed that created this property transfer tax, it was set up so that up to 1/3 would go each to the county commission, to a farmland protection board if one was enabled in the county, and then to the state housing development fund.
Right.
And there have been two changes to the transfer tax legislation in the past two legislative sessions. 2 years ago, it was changed to increase the county's allocation from the maximum of $2.20 per $1,000 valuation in real property to $3.30. That was strongly supported by Berkeley County. I think Jefferson was kind of neutral on it, but it did pass the legislature. The counties can do with those funds as they want, and in Berkeley County, they used it to help with their share of the regional jail. This most recent effort was pushed by the folks with the Martinsburg and Berkeley County Parks and Recreation Board, and that has set up a schedule. So over the next 10 years, each year, 10% less money will go to the West Virginia Housing Development Authority and be retained locally by the counties. The goal, I think, in Berkeley County is to allocate those funds to the acquisition of parkland. The farmland protection community has been okay with this because the original effort by Parks and Recreation was to actually dig into our share and create some sort of a cost share system. And I had to explain to the decision makers that the IRS does not see parkland as being open space or anything near the equivalent of a conservation easement. Yeah. So that's where we're at right now. The county commissions in the counties with farmland protection boards may not on a whim, reallocate those monies. They would have to get the state law to be changed. And we have in the past brought up this issue when entities attempt to get in to the legislation and change it. And we've got strong partners with the Association of Conservation Districts, which are elected officials, of course, and with the Farm Bureau, in addition to the Association of West Virginia Farmland Protection Boards. So we monitor this legislation, and we hope that this is it, and that Berkeley County's various entities are happy with their increased revenues right now, and that we don't see an attempt to get in and change this legislation in the future, but you never know.
All right. Hey, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. We've had a robust chat going on for the last few minutes too, so we'll make sure to capture all of this, all of the feedback and information that's been provided in the chat too, as we take a look at the goals and we finalize the prompts, the questions that we'll be sending out. And Tanner, I think we'll connect later today, but coming up with a few specific goals to get feedback on some of these proposed tweaks and suggestions will give folks a little more direction to respond to. So thanks, everyone. We actually are coming up sort of close to the end of our time now. So we're going to have the recording from this call. We'll have notes that we'll send out after the call, that survey, which will provide a few opportunities specific and broader to provide more input on the goals and the goal setting here. We're going to spend the last couple minutes of our call talking about the timeline and next steps for moving forward and action items here. So right now we are sort of closing out, this being our collaborative gathering. We're closing out our onboarding and process development stage in our efforts here. So that included some strategic planning calls, which we've had with Tanner, and a presentation that we made discussing the same sort of strategy approach here as we, same approach that we've been discussing here today with the steering committee in August. So this call will close out that first step here. Our next step is defining, refining, and finalizing our goals, which we just kicked off with that great discussion. And we'll continue with a survey, which will be to develop our organizational goals and to then confirm our goals and have those reviewed and approved. So that'll be most of what we focus on for the next 6 weeks. Will be on our goal setting and making sure that those goals are broad enough to be collaborative wide, and also specific enough to be able to take our next step, which is developing our work group objectives or goals that are specific to each of the work groups. And that'll be our next step here in the October to January timeframe. So in the fall into early winter, sort of closing out 2020, we'll be meeting with each of the work groups and requesting input, feedback, going back and forth on those objectives. And in January, we'll all come back together with this full group and discuss, provide feedback on the objectives. So that'll be an opportunity for other groups, other work groups to provide feedback on objectives that have been developed. And if there is any overlap, if there are opportunities to implement an objective with the help of one of the other work groups having a role of some sort, we'll be able to have that opportunity to discuss and finalize there. Then those will be reviewed, discussed, and approved, and we'll move forward with developing our action plans. So these will be similarly developed as we're going to approach the work group objectives. We'll be hosting regular meetings in the spring, discussing those, having back and forth with emails, maybe some survey opportunities to make sure that we get everything that we need there. And then we'll come back together, have an opportunity to provide feedback on those action plans and making sure that they address the objectives that were developed. And then those will be reviewed and approved. And while that's going on, we'll, at Cadmus, will also be developing, and there may be some separate communications about those other elements of the strategic plan, things like additional guidance, ability to develop new work groups, sort of chartering new work groups, however that methodology and guidance ends up coming together. We'll start working on that in the spring as well, once we have a clear direction on the objectives and action plans. And then there'll be an opportunity, it's looking like it'll be around May, late April into early May, where everyone will have an opportunity to review the draft strategic plan. And then in June, we'll go through updates to the draft plan, sending out the revised final plan, and then approving the final plan and having a release or launch of that plan before June 30th. So we have a pretty tight timeline laid out here, trying to work within some of the meetings that are already scheduled, just hosting longer meetings when we can to make sure that you can all still get the work that you're already doing covered and discuss and meet about that, while we also have an opportunity to talk about the strategic planning effort and putting together the plan. So given this timeline, our next steps are to first establish our long-term goals for the collaborative. So to build on the conversations, discussions, and chats that were coming in today, we'll have that survey effort. Survey will go out in the next few days and come back with this whole group. We'll all come back together for a meeting on October 1st. So at that point, we will bring together the survey results, responses, any other input or discussions that have taken place between September 1st and October 1st. We'll try to be as transparent in this process as we can, and move forward with having that meeting on October 1st to make sure that everybody agrees on the goals across the collaborative, so we can use those as our foundation for moving forward with our objective setting. Sometime after October 1st, the steering committee will approve the goals, and they'll also start figuring out what their roles are and going through their role setting process for how that will be included in the strategic plan. Once that's done, the work groups will meet in the fall. We have the conservation work group meeting scheduled already for November. The stewardship and education outreach work groups will schedule their meetings for the fall, and those meetings and emails preceding those meetings, possibly surveys or emails after those meetings, are really going to be where a lot of the heavy lifting and workshopping of the objective setting is going to be taking place. Then we'll have the work groups agree on their own objectives and bring those objectives to the All Partners meeting in mid-January 2021, where we'll discuss the objectives and finalize them, and then the steering committee will review and approve them. And that sort of gets us through 2020 and into 2021 with our planning efforts here. All right, so that's our timeline at a glance and our specific next steps. As Tanner chatted in, keep an eye out for your email boxes. The goal survey will be coming out in the next few days, and there'll be a turnaround time for that. If there's any additional input that doesn't fit into the survey format that you want to provide, feel free to send that via email as well to Tanner or myself, and he can get it to us so that we can make sure that we're including as much as we can and taking everybody's perspective and input into the process as we work forward in the next 3 or 4 weeks to put together some proposed goals to discuss in October. Are there any questions before we end the call? We're just at 3 o'clock. Not hearing or seeing anything. Any hands raised? Tanner, is there anything you wanted to add to close out?
No, just thank you, Ashley. Look forward to working with you. Like we said in the chat box, that goal survey will be the first thing, and keep an eye out for the meeting invite for October 1st, and we'll keep this moving. It's a little bit of a crunch timeline, but I know we can do it. So just thank you, Ashley, and thanks for everyone for your thoughts today. And with that, I think we're done. You all can sign off. We'll follow up with you via email soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, everyone.
Ashley.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you.
Thanks.